I grew up as a pastor's kid, and I remember my dad would have missionaries to come in, and I was always fascinated by missionaries. And I remember as a boy, dreaming about going to faraway places, never imagining that one day I would be working in this field. I remember in the fourth grade specifically, there was brothers from Vietnam that actually came, refugees, that came to our small little town in rural North Carolina and started going to school. And while everyone else was suspicious of them, I was just magnetically attracted to them, drawn to them, and just so fascinated by the fact that they were from this different culture and different way of life. Then as time progressed, and I was a young adult when I was converted to Christ, age 21. And I remember at that point that God really placed a desire for the nations in my heart. I didn't know quite how to express it or how that desire to preach to the nations, work with the nations would be fulfilled. But I remember I was working a job and I was in the warehouse every day. And it was an electrical warehouse, and so there was lots of wire and all kind of stuff in the warehouse. I was often by myself doing the job, and I remember I would preach to the spools of wire, and I would pretend that they were, these spools of wire were Chinese, these were Japanese, these were Africans, and that's the way this passion in my own heart for God's missionary plan for the nations began to take shape. Over a period of time, a series of circumstances developed in our family where God kind of nailed our feet to the floor, and I just wasn't able to go be full-time on the mission field. And so I started pastoring, and I remember during those years of pastoring, taking my first mission trip, actually going on a plane for the very first time was a mission trip to Chile. And I remember coming back and just being so consumed with what I felt like was this call that was in my heart to pursue taking the gospel to the nations. For several years after that, we would do short-term missions trips with the church that I would lead, and every time we went, I would always ask the question, what can we do to help you? What is the greatest need? We would ask this of the missionaries and the native pastors and others that we were working with, and inevitably the answer was always the same. We need training. Our leaders need training. And after hearing that for a number of years, the Lord really just began to cement that in my own heart. And I knew at some point that God was going to lead me full-time into the field of being able to work with and develop and train other leaders. That finally came about back in 2021. I was able to connect with Dr. Steve Van Horn, and we discussed the fact of me coming on to take over as the director of IDEM. And he said, would you pray about taking over? And I said, I don't even need to pray, because I knew at that point I'd been praying for years and the opportunity had finally arrived. And so I'm so excited to be able to lead this organization, so excited to be able to follow this passion that the Lord has given me for the nations. And I trust that you will join me as well, as together we go to the nations, train leaders, and make an impact around the world.